Welcome to the PIpeIQ Weekly AI Podcast, where we cover all the topics related to AI business acceleration. We are in the heart of Silicon Valley here at PIpeIQ headquarters in Palo Alto, California. This is podcast number 3. My name is Eric Nilsson. With me today, I have my co-host, Rajesh Karam. Today is Monday, October 21st, 2024. Rajesh, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Eric. I'm doing great. It was a nice day here. Not that I got much of a chance to go out, but it's always great to have nice sunny weather.
It is a beautiful sunny day here in Palo Alto. We had that heat wave that happened two weeks ago, but now it's been chilly. Winter is here. We're coming into November pretty soon here, so just another 10 days and we'll be in the cold weather, and we're gonna have to turn the heat on. And I know that's tough for everybody across the U.S. where it's worse weather. I have a friend that came in from Chicago, and he's like, "Wow, Palo Alto, what a beautiful place." It's like, yeah, we get spoiled here, but it is beautiful. Silicon Valley is expensive. It's expensive to be here, but we do get nice weather, so we do like that. On the show today, we're going to talk about cognitive architecture for AI. I like to call it Act 2, right? Because it's like Act 1 was ChatGPT and OpenAI and all that, but now we're starting to get reasoning right in the models, right, and then cognitive capabilities in the models, and so that's kind of the next wave. So we're going to talk about that today. Before we get to cognitive architecture and how it applies to business services, let's talk a little bit about the news. What's been happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think some big things came in. I think earlier today, Stripe made a $1.1 billion acquisition. That's more around crypto, and they acquired a company called Bridge. And they're just for stablecoin payments, right, across in their infra. So that's kind of bullish for crypto for sure. On the AI front, Perplexity is raising a new round, $500 million. Raising $500 million at a $9 billion valuation, which I believe is double the valuation that it got about just 8 months ago. So,
is this coming from Silicon Valley, or is this coming from Wall Street? Where is this? Where is the VC money? Where are they located, and where's this money coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously these large rounds need heavyweight players, right? And as far as Stripe's acquisition is concerned, for example, I mean, a lot of the investors in Stripe in their previous last round, for example, they haven't gone public yet, even though they can, right? Those investors are late stage investors. I don't know if Fidelity's investor, for example, but like Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, these heavyweight.
So these are the big guys.
Wall Street,
Wall Street
right?
guys,
like Wall Street or private equity,
and
so those are kind of the players. But I think Perplexity, of course, we'll have to see who these guys are. But yeah, obviously people with very deep pockets, right? And some of the traditional venture investors also have a ton of dry powder, right? And Reason, some of these folks have raised money for late stage rounds, specifically funds devoted to late stage investments. So I think that's kind of where
Got it. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
What else is going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's big actually for Perplexity, because I think there's been some skepticism around, hey, is that an effective engine? How does it do, etc. So, this is a little bit of a downer for Google for sure, right? I mean, just kind of eating into the search share. That's what it really means, right? So Google, there's OpenAI eating into that search share. Now there's Perplexity, right? So Google definitely has a thing or two it has to worry about as far as showing up its sort of position is concerned, right?
They're late to the game. They're late to the game. I think Apple, some of the Apple engineers announced this week that, and I don't think they meant to announce it. I think they were just discussing it on podcasts, right? Where they're 2 years late, right? Like they were off building self-driving cars, and then Apple reorganized. I have some friends that worked on the self-driving car projects, and they came in and reorganized that, canceled the car project, and then said, hey, you guys are all working on AI. But as we know, you just don't take car automation people. Now there is some AI when it comes to car learning, map learning, that kind of stuff, but you just don't take a team like that and turn them over and go, guess what, you guys are AI specialists now, right? Like,
LLMs,
and all that. And so as Google and Apple find themselves really behind, some of the leaders in AI, right?
Right.
And now you look at the money that's going to, the greenfield new players, right? That's going to put pressure on Google, no question.
Absolutely gonna put pressure on Google. And I mean, Apple, I mean, at least from Steve Jobs days, it's had a reputation for coming up from behind and releasing these amazing products, right? So we'll have to
Right.
see what they're able to do this time around. I mean, they've had Siri for over 10 years now.
They do make a lot of money, Captain. Like they're like they make a lot of billions every quarter. So
Right.
it reminds me of Apple's like the Microsoft, right? If you look at how much profit they make every quarter, right? Like they could own all of the AI companies if they
Right.
really want to. They could just go on a buying spree and buy everybody, right? Because that's how much money they
Yeah,
make.
they're tremendous. I mean,
Right.
tremendous cash flow machine, undoubtedly. Yeah. So, I mean, they can go and hire all of these. I think bigger companies have a capability to hire, this top-notch talent. And this top-notch talent, of course, has choices in terms of where they work. So there's definitely a talent war as well, kind of underneath. But so we have that. We have Perplexity. I mean, another one just around copyright and infringement and some of the stuff that we would expect to see, just coinciding with this fundraise. Might have been a PR move, but News Corp decided to sue Perplexity for basically the claim is that, hey, you're taking away our revenues. And essentially what that means from a technical standpoint, I think there's a lot of scraping going on and Perplexity, right? Like not driving traffic.
Who owns this IP
Yes.
that's ending up in the LLMs,
all the
right?
information. Exactly. Right. Like if I'm serving up,
go after that. We were having a conversation about this last week as well, or this week, around coding and like who really owns that code, right? When you're using AI to write the code and everybody's using Copilot and all that, like who actually owns the results of that code?
That's true. I mean, there's going to be some very interesting IP sort of outcomes over the next few years, especially around creative professions, and coding could very well fall in that, right? Like, so if something is not in the open source domain, right? Yeah, if it's it's being used in some form or fashion. So there's going to be something.
But speaking of falling behind, Google and Apple, where we were talking about that, like the topic for today's podcast is the cognitive layer for AI, right? And like this is what we call Act 2 in AI, right? Where the Act 1 was ChatGPT, serial answers, right? Very structured, right? Then when you start doing reasoning layers and cognitive layers, right? Well, that's an Act 2. That's making your AI much smarter, and you just don't jump into AI, and start writing the generation 2, right? It takes a while to learn how to do this, right? And so Google and Apple might be jumping in, but they're probably still on, Act 1, right? Which is just serial answer, right? Do the LM, get the answer back. But when you start looking at the Sequoia article that we're going to talk about, like they're really talking about, no, the next generation is already here, and your engineers, are now 2 years behind if you're just getting started.
Right. I mean, I think to be sort of on in Google and Apple's defense, I mean, these guys have such massive user base already, right? Billions of users, and so obviously they have to. The whole sort of incumbent, innovator's dilemma is always coming into play. While ChatGPT or Perplexity doesn't have to worry about all of that, pretty much, right? So they are starting from a different base. So their ability to innovate, like Perplexity and OpenAI, is of a totally different order, I would imagine, right? So even with the same access to talent, for that matter, I mean, as we know,
the thing I would say about Apple is that they're good at getting business value, right? So some of the people get lost in the technology, right? Where Apple, I don't know about Google. Google gets lost in the technology, but Apple's very good at understanding what the customer need is, and then building something that appeals to the customer need or a business value. So they do have that going for them. Right? They do.
I mean, just like tremendous UI UX capabilities, right? Like just what they're able to produce, and that goes to value, business value. I mean, user value, right? Yeah. I mean,
because we get caught up in AI, but we have to remember that it's also business value,
right?
And I got to say that this week in the news, or what I got to listen to. CIO for Broadcom, which where I work, when I'm not podcasting, he's talking about AI projects, and he's got public videos out there, and he's talking about where they invest and where they don't, and he coined a term which I thought was interesting, which is AI stands for what did I say?
Always investigating.
Always investigating, right? Like where
Right.
nobody really knows what the business value is yet, or there's
Right.
a lot of technologists that are actually working
Right.
in AI engines, whether it's LLMs or the cognitive layer and the reasoning layer, and where does the business value come, right? And
Yeah.
well, you're always investigating AI, you're always investigating what you're actually trying to build, right? And
Yes.
what you're trying to get out of that system. So
Yeah.
there is a little of that as well. As we come, new technology doesn't necessarily mean business value.
No,
right?
not
So,
at all, not
right.
at all. And I think how you think about business value is going to differ if you're an SMB, mid-market player, or enterprise player, right? So I think with enterprise space, I mean, there's a bunch of different projects going on, and just like a VC portfolio kind of thing, you probably, a lot of them may not work out, but some of them are going to give outstanding sort of value, create outstanding value for the company, right? So there is definitely that, and we are currently in that phase where I think organizations are throwing, I mean, in a good way, right? Like throwing a lot of money at these AI projects. But I think what we are going to be seeing is that if you're a SMB or a mid-market buyer, right, you're going to be in the market to buy tools, not projects, right?
Right.
For an enterprise, it's more on projects. And if we go with what Gardner is saying, I think we are in the middle of the, sort of in the hype cycle, right? We are in the sort of middle of the curve, right? So we have not yet hit the trough, and potentially we'll hit the trough in 2026.
Yeah. What did you call it when you hit the trough? You hit the
trough of disillusionment.
Yes, that's a trough of disillusionment, because you're always investigating, and pretty soon you look at the number of POCs you had running and how many dollars you actually spend, and you get delusioned because you're like, we haven't got anything out of this, right? So
right.
It is interesting.
Yes, it is interesting. So I'm sure, right? I mean, if things the way they are going, and then this is true of a lot of technology cycles, right? So it could definitely go to that point, but the whole thing is, after that trough of disillusionment, you are then going to see a gradual uptake, and then things are going to stabilize from a technology standpoint. So I think there's a lot of scope. Again, the considerations for mid-market players or SMB folks is going to be slightly different.
So
at the end of the day, it's all about value.
Anything else in the news before we get to the main topics?
No, I think that's a good roundup for now.
All right. Well, good jumping off point. So what we want to do is talk about the Sequoia article, right? So Sequoia has produced a pretty interesting article that created some buzz around the cognitive layers, right? The reasoning layer and the cognitive layer are now maturing, and what that article is really pointing at is, the machine learning AI was all about just giving back responses, right?
That's
and it wasn't doing a lot of thinking, right? You either had it in the model or you didn't, right?
Yeah,
and then that was what you got, right?
Right.
Where now the act 2 of this is architecting the cognitive layer and the reasoning layer that come together, that actually then, the longer it thinks, the smarter it gets, right? Like, is that what that article is really getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think this is the act 2 is around agents, right? And swarm of agents, like agent orchestration, right? Like, so how will multiple agents work together to do something? And if multiple agents have to work, and even if one agent has to do, I think there has to be strong reasoning capability. And that reasoning capability, the unlock, is with the latest model, what is called Strawberry, or what was called Q previously, right? So this is the O1 model, right? So that update, I think, from OpenAI is really opening up some new possibilities, right? And that possibility, in short, is the ability of the LLM to reason and reflect. And if you ask a question, it can sort of pause
and think about
it before it gives a response, right? So I think so. A couple of things here, right? One is, if you took a system 1, system 2 sort of responses. System 1 example would be, if you ask the LLM what is the capital of Bhutan, right, and gives a simple straight answer. Either you know it or you don't, right? That's pretty much part of the knowledge base, right? But a second one, like more a system 2 response, would be something that involves reflection or thinking, or how do you approach? How do you go? How do you go from place A to place B when there is an accident
right? Thinking about why you're asking that, or what you're asking.
What you're asking,
knowing the context of what you've already engaged with around that city, and then giving answers back based on talking to a real person.
Right? Yes, talking to a real person,
because they know my context and they're thinking about it, and then they're offering up some something besides just a straight line answer.
Exactly. So I think that's kind of the system to kind of thinking, and the underlying sort of not thought process, but what I think there's two other sort of terms here, which I think is interesting, is training time compute and inference time compute. So training time compute being, right, the stuff that the LLM has been taught in training, right? And that's where, so whatever your system one responses are coming from. But this inference time compute is the new thing, which is, okay, during inference time, if you give me enough time, I can come back with a more reasoned, thought out answer. And I mean, they show a couple of charts in the article about how the longer you allow it to think, the better the response, the higher the quality of the response, which is a pretty amazing thing. Like right now we have the like the ability potentially to create new systems, and that's where sort of the swarm of agents and kind of concept comes through, right?
I struggle with this whole concept though, because like, isn't it just your model isn't very good, and so you need more time for the computer to grind on this model, and therefore you need more time, and the longer it gets to grind, the smarter it gets. I mean, where do you draw that line between like just getting a faster CPU, or their models aren't that good yet, or they haven't refined the idea of cognitive, right? So they're going, well, we need more time to do that, right?
Of course,
it's not
of
like
course.
it's a human sitting here thinking, right? But,
right.
But I guess the point is that I mean, it is trying to think. Right?
It is absolutely trying to think, and the whole point is, yes, it may. I think what we'll see, just like with costs coming down, for example. I mean, I was reading a couple of days ago how the costs on 3.5 or 4 have come down by 98% since the last release, like crazy dropping of costs. So it's literally a knife fight between some of these foundational model providers in terms of being competitive, right? So we are going to see improvements in how fast this reflection or thinking happens, right? So that's going to dramatically go down. So I wouldn't be surprised if we 12 months from now we are saying, hey, this thing has improved in its performance by
and I read the article, and where the article ends up getting to is services, right? That actually services require thought, right? It's not just an answer. It's like it requires thought. And so as they had a pie chart that showed, how many applications really do a good job at services, and the wedge is very small, right? There's not very many that actually tackle this market, and the market is pretty big.
I think go ahead, finish. Actually,
no, I'll just say, so where the article went was, as we get cognitive capabilities, right, you can actually target the service industry, right, which is whatever $10 trillion market, market cap of, or total addressable market, where people are answering questions on phone calls, whether they're engaged with other services that you have to do. Now, if the AI can think, it's better at replacing these people, right, or augmenting these people, right? And so it seems like that's where they're going, and they were like showing you kind of what services are out there, how big the market is, and how this Act 2 will start to go after these type of solutions.
That's right. I think so if one were to sort of zoom out, Pete Flint of NFX, I think, first sort of coined or thought of this notion that, hey, there's a bunch of companies that are saying, hey, we're going to create autonomous employees, right, that are basically going to replace that particular person who's in that function, versus some others selling AI as a software, right? So now, I mean, essentially, if we were to think of that dichotomy, it's not really a dichotomy, it's more of a continuum, it's a spectrum, right? Really, that's how it is. And we're not going to get any sort of autonomous function anytime soon. Like, it's a spectrum again, and we'll slowly probably get to that, right? But the point here is that we have, for the last 20-25 years, we've been thinking of, or 15-20 years, is software as a service, which is we build software and use that, right, off the cloud, and you pay for what you use, kind of thing, right? Now it's being flipped on the head, and just kind of an interesting the wording, but service as a software. And I think the thought process here is that, hey, these agentic capabilities actually can do more complicated things, not just routine tasks. So I think that is where this, the diagram of saying, hey, like the current B2B SaaS software market, right, or cloud software market is, I don't know, 400 billion, right? While overall it's 650 billion, basically including on-prem stuff, right? Now, if you think about salaries for people and so on, that's like a $10 trillion market. So
Right.
the point is, AI has barely scratched the surface of that $10 trillion market. And there is an opportunity here that it will potentially take on some of these things. So really the level of automation and the orchestration of flows, I mean, could go to an entirely different level. That's kind of the premise, I think, right?
Yeah, I
And it's
think I
something
struggle with it at the beginning, but I think I understand it now. It's really not service as a software; it's service as software, right? Like
service
as
software.
software,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
where it's
yeah,
just like
yeah.
you're building the service
Right.
from software. It's service
Yes,
as software, right?
that's right.
And it's almost like human services as software, right?
That's
Right?
right.
Because it's
That's
like
right.
a lot of the services today are all human based, right?
Mm,
And now
mm,
as AI comes into this, and you have cognitive ability,
mm.
now it all of a sudden is. And that was I think that created a lot of buzz around the Sequoia article, right?
Right.
Because people started to realize, oh, yeah, we're building that. And PipeIQ is
Yes.
a perfect example of that. You guys are building service
Agents.
as
Yeah.
software, right?
Yes.
And yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what the Sequoia article does a really good job is sort of bring together a bunch of different aspects, right, in a really nice, tight fashion in that article. I think that's what resonates because independently, a lot of these things have been discussed, right? Like AI agents. I mean, either LangChain frameworks, right? LangChain
mhm,
or DSPY or other things have been around for about, AutoGPT, in the very earliest beginnings for about whatever, 12 months, 18 months, something like that, right? So I think, but now the fact that a foundational model democratizes some of these agentic capabilities is kind of interesting, right?
right.
Now, a bunch of developers can go and build on some of these things.
And it's
Yeah.
also flipped up when I think of agents. I
Hmm.
think of monitoring agents that are installed on computers,
Oh,
right,
yeah.
to look for data and look at
Right.
what's actually happening, and then reporting back.
Right.
But in this sense, agents are really the things that are going to do work
Correct.
out on the internet, whether by consuming APIs to send mail or to do different functions. These agents are almost the backwards of monitoring agents, but in fact get things done agents, right? And
Correct.
then you're writing these agents for whatever, whether they're a Zoom call or a pizza
Yeah.
delivery agent or
Yes.
whatever it is, so that your AI gets the data, is building a service, and then the service has to do something, and so the agents are the doers.
Yes, yes,
Right,
absolutely. And that doing could be an agent that's monitoring something, right? Hey,
right,
did company X post a new job or did a new employee join and so on and so forth? So, right, that would be a monitoring agent, a email writing agent, a calling agent,
right,
right, like something that does a internet search and comes back with the results kind of thing, right? So, or it could be an internal microservice, right? That's doing a particular function. So there's going to be all of these different agents and they have to be sort of tied together in some nice fashion, right? And then they interact with each other to create now something of value for an organization, right? Like for an enterprise, for a particular function, for a particular, right? Like, so I think there is a lot of buzz. I mean, I think again, the Sequoia article is kind of interesting and timely, right? Like, I mean, A16Z has been posting a bunch of stuff about, kind of co-pilots or assistants, right, for different roles. Yeah, Foundation Capital. I mean, there's Mayfield and so on. Mayfield has a like a billboard on 101 actually right here
mhm.
in your, I think, Redwood City or San Mateo. They have a billboard, right? Where they're actually saying, hey, if you're working in a garage on a project, we'd like to hear from you, right? So I think this is that $10 trillion TAM, right?
Right,
That is
right,
attractive, right, to
right.
investors. That these, yeah, right,
And
folks are
then,
targeting.
you
Yeah,
know, when we're talking about marketing automation tools, right?
yeah,
And sales acceleration, right?
right, right.
This is one of these service things that are
Yes.
out there now. It's less service the way we think customer calls in wants service, and
Mm.
it's more of a service, software service as
Yes.
software, where you're actually building out a capability that will either augment your sales team
Hmm.
or augment your marketing team or replace your marketing team,
Right.
right? Or
Right.
add additional capacity to your team, right?
That's right. That's right.
So and then these agents enable that, right?
The agents enable that, and I think again, I mean, there's every function. Like if you think about it, sales and marketing salaries account for about 1.1 trillion, right? Like is one number that I saw, right? And each function is very deep in its domain, right? Like jobs to be done for an account executive, for
Mhm.
SDR, for I don't know, for a mortgage consultant, doesn't matter which area you think about, or a plant biologist, right? They are doing very, very specific things. If you have to build a agent or a agentic framework for one of these folks or an assistant, you have to really understand what does this person do on a day-to-day basis, and go and kind of automate that, so to speak, right?
And as the sales process
Yeah.
automates, right, and goes more and more digital, because
Mhm.
yeah, if you really look at selling nowadays, half of what you're doing is all digital, right?
Right.
You're processing
Right.
online orders, you're processing online communications with your customers,
Right.
you're canvassing by sending mail out to people, doing
Right.
cold calls. It's probably 50% of the job is digital,
Right.
right? And
Right.
if you can then build AI to help with that digital workload,
Yeah.
you're just freeing up your sales team to do that. And that's kind of like this concept, right, of the
Premise. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, your average, these days, they say, your average prospect, right, is doing 80% of his research before they ever talk to a sales rep, right? Like, or an SDR for that
Sure,
matter,
right,
right? So there's tremendous amount of work that they're doing.
Right.
That's all digital, right? It's not like they're gonna, I mean, it's all being done on the internet.
And
Yeah.
even as a community guy like myself that runs big community, 5
Yeah.
million member community,
Right.
the community does call deflection, already, right?
Right.
And that gets us $5 million worth of value. But
Right.
if you really look at the community is actually helping sell the product, right?
Right.
Recommending products. To your point,
Right.
most people already do all their research. They work with the community. They
Right.
got, and we're looking at, like, is AI, is service our software, right? Which is a community member, right? You could, a community member is just a service component if you really look at it.
Right.
It's a free service component because you don't have to pay a community member.
Right.
They're just doing it out of the goodness of their heart to share.
Right.
But in the end, if you could have an AI engine that can do that same work,
Right.
then do you really need to have a community there, right? Or can that just can the AI just figure things out and post things and answer questions and engage with them, right?
Yes.
So it is interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think, I mean, on both sides of the fence, the person on needing an answer to a question and the community member answering the question, both will have access to AI. And I think the opportunity here is maybe that conversation discussion between those community members is going to be just taken to a much higher level, basically, right? Like all the basic questions you don't need to answer over and over again, like it's kind of quote unquote your FAQ.
Yeah, if you take the learning aspect
Yes.
of AI, right, that's constantly learning, right? Learning, listening to this podcast, it could be learning, right? We're publishing this and it could be listening and putting a transcript, putting it on the model, and it's just constantly learning. And then that makes your service smarter.
That makes your service, your assistant, or whatever you call it, definitely smarter for sure.
So this Sequoia article really just brought to the forefront this notion of service, right, and agents to do these services, and what the total size of the market is, and where it's at, and we call it Act 2, or the second phase of AI.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple more things here. I think that they have sort of brought the whole idea of cognitive architecture. I think is interesting. I don't know if they brought out this term in their previous Act 1 sort of article, right? I don't know, a year or 2 years ago, but what is interesting now, you have the reasoning layer in the foundation model. It's able to reflect and think before responding, okay, whatever you send to the API. Now, the other point the article makes, and it's great for folks like PIpeIQ, is that the real world is messy. Enterprises, right, need not cookie cutter answers. In the sense, foundational models, right, by their very nature, are general purpose machines, right? So the article makes the point that these AI researchers are not particularly interested in solving like domain specific problems. That's not their thing, right? Like that's not their thing. So that's where application developers or folks in the application layer come in, right? Like, so you take this
focusing on a domain.
Focusing on a domain problem, right? So take this general purpose expertise that an LLM offers, and then hone it, shape it, right, and make it relevant and useful, right, for that particular function in a particular company, an enterprise, and a kind of enterprise, right? Again, what you build for a mid-market player could be very different from what you build for an enterprise player, as an example, right? What you build for healthcare could be obviously very different from what you build for supply chain, and so on and so forth. So I think that is another additional point I think this article is making, which is super relevant. And the point that if you were to think about how investors thought about quote unquote GPT wrappers about 2 years ago, which is hey, he or she is just hitting OpenAI and getting a response, and so that's kind of a wrapper. Now this article talks about how that's kind of coming full circle. It's not really a bad rap anymore, kind of thing, right? Because these models are developing so fast. Those capabilities are, dramatically improving. So if you take, there is a trade-off. I mean, I take a Llama 3 or an open source model or a mixed role, and then fine tune it, etc. I mean, OpenAI could leapfrog and give that to you in 4 months' time, right? Like, so you got to, as somebody in the application layer, you got to think through that. What are the trade-offs, even when you build agents or a swarm of agents, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I mean, cost considerations aside, there's definitely costs, right, that'll come into play, right?
What is swarm of agents like, and how when I consider swarm, I'm considering
Bees.
no,
Yeah, you have
I
bees.
know, no, not bees, but like drones or something. They're communicating. They have a fabric that they're working and communicating with, and then
Right.
they're accomplishing a bigger goal because
Right.
the swarm is behaving as a swarm,
Right.
whether it's
Right.
the API interfaces. So
Yes.
when we say swarm of agents, or is that what we're talking about? That these agents self-communicate?
That's kind of, I mean, yeah, that's the beginnings of that, at least, right? Like with agents, I think we the intention is that, I mean, I don't know if you had to plan a trip to Bali, right? I guess, as an example, there's some bit of complexity involved with hotel rooms and flights, and what's the lowest price,
Yeah.
etc.,
So
and particular context about you,
and
right?
each one of those agents handles some component
Some
of that.
component of it, right? And then they have to communicate with each other, obviously, right?
Mhm.
And to figure out, to come up with the most optimal outcome, right? So that is, I mean, yeah. So I think swarm, of course, is kind of buzzy. It's a nice, interesting word, but really,
It's a fun
it's a fun word,
It
right?
means a lot
But
to
I think
people. Right.
orchestration
Right.
is more straightforward, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a bunch of
orchestrated agents.
yes,
Right.
orchestrated
Right.
agents. So
You're right.
there's
Swarm is a better word.
so,
Got the swarm of the agents.
swarm
Right.
of the agents.
Solving a domain specific problem. Right. And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
multiple components of that then
Yes.
make that all come together.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Versus your serial chat GPT, where I just go, write me a legal document that, for Santa Clara County. Right. And,
Right.
oh, I get this legal document, and
Right.
it's very serial, and there isn't a lot of, a lot of cognitive thinking around that. It's just regurgitating what it's gathered from a government world somewhere. And I
Right.
give it some parameters that, Santa Clara County, whatever.
Right.
But when you start looking at bigger services, right, then you need these agents that are applied. And then, cognitive thinking, probably helps you determine what you want those agents to be doing.
Right.
And then you get a result.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what if, imagine, property taxes, right? Something that can go file your property taxes for you or something like that. I don't know, right? Or looks after the home maintenance, right? Like calls the plumber, calls this, predictive maintenance. Who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities here. I mean, that's much more complex. I
want QuickBooks to tell me when it's time to send in the quarterly tax payments, because I always miss those, and then I end up getting a fine at the end penalty at the end of the year, right? Where it would be nice to have that AI capability with agents that are actually looking at how much revenue I'm making for my bank. What does that look like? You could see where they could actually have an AI, swarm of agents that are monitoring everything that's going on and then solving this, as opposed to me getting a tax return at the end of the year going, oh, look, I got a penalty again.
Yeah. And then, I think some of the more complex tasks even now continue to be, sort of unsolved. I mean, so clearly I think there's massive opportunity. So that would be I think those are a couple of some new, I think, sort of things, right? I think that come up here.
So let's switch gears here a little bit, because we are talking about the Sequoia article that covered the reasoning and cognitive layers of the AI Act 2, I like to call it, but then also all the services that are out there. So let's talk a little bit about PIpeIQ. I believe that you basically took the notion of this Act 2, this model, and built your architecture around this.
Yes. So I mean, honestly, my thesis for a while has been the fact that these foundational models are just so sophisticated and improving so fast. My emphasis always has been on the domain expertise, right? Like, so I have 15, 20 years in the valley. On pipeline, building pipeline, generating revenue. How do we do that, right? Let's solve that problem, right? Using AI, but stay in the app layer and leverage, right, these foundational models, right? I mean, that's kind of my thought process. And of course, build your own models if you need to, but just remember, right? Yeah, like the space is moving very fast. So you first kind of what do you call, build very, very strong competency in the workflows.
Yeah.
Go do your workflows,
That's what I
right?
was gonna say. It's really about workflow
It
and the
is.
sales workflow, and
Yes.
what are the key elements that you're trying to promote for your
Yes.
sales flow. I talk about selling my honey, right? And
Right.
like I've learned that in order to sell honey effectively, you want to have 3 flavors. You put them out in bowls, you invite customers to taste them, and I guarantee you, if they taste 1 or 2 or 3, they're going to at least buy their favorite, and sometimes they buy all 3, right? And you're like, you triple your sales just by having the right engagement with your customers, right? And so that's different. That's different per sales process. So you do have to either build a model, make the model, create the right agents, and then build some cognitive, process around that workflow.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in this farmers market example you're giving, if Square were to build a bunch of agents or something around their POS reader where the person, they'd have to think deeply about, okay, how does a seller in a farmers market do their thing, right? So I think that's super important. But yes, so in PIpeIQ's case, we have thought deeply about a couple of key roles, right? We have started with the SDR, or sales development rep, right? And SDR, and then the account executive, for example, right? A couple of key roles where there's a bunch of complexity. The churn rate is very high with SDRs, for example, and there's a bunch of repetitive tasks there, right? That could potentially be low hanging fruit, right? So we've chosen to sort of focus there, and then think about account executives as well. And the surface area here is massive, right? And this is what we're going to see. My prediction, I think, our thesis or hypothesis is that over the next, let's say, 24 months, right, you'll see folks, as they build domain expertise in one function, they'll start sort of gradually, right? Like that's how you build a platform play, kind of a land and expand strategy, right? So you'll see some of these players, build, I don't know, an autonomous agent for SDRs, then it goes to AEs, and then maybe you do it one for recruiters. Some roles lend to them. There's a whole question around data, right, which we haven't talked about, but all of these AI systems, of course, need data, right? And there's different kinds of data. I think as an application layer provider, you want to have some sort of a data moat. Clearly, right? If you don't have that data moat,
well, I wonder if you can have smart agents at the same time. So I'm thinking Amazon, right? And I want to sell on Amazon, and there's a known set of things you have to do on Amazon to get sales, right? And so like you could almost build some of these default templates activities into your agent itself, right? If the agent is going to go off and interact with Amazon somehow, right? Like list your product and get there, gets a, and then encourage people to buy it and offer them a discount or whatever that is, and send them mail once they click on something, or as you say, monitor a website and see how long they're on a page, right? And then you do that. Some of that requires a data model, that's sophisticated, but some of them are just like almost like template agents, right? This is how we're going to do this.
Think about it in the same Amazon example, right? Like a price monitoring bot, right? So if you're selling some, right, whatever is your product, you want to be competitive. How many competitors? What's their pricing? And so real-time price optimization problem kind of thing, right? And people have been tackling that pre-LLMs as well.
Yes.
But like just with I think these foundational models, potentially it could be taken to an entirely new level, right? Who knows? I'm not into price optimization, but that's an example where clearly agents can come into play. And could there be an agent that's going to go set up your Shopify store and Stripe and all the whole orchestration and go buy from some Alibaba in China, identify a vendor?
Right. You could actually have the swarm of agents doing the buying and the selling and arbitraging all at the same time, right? Where and there are people that do that, make a lot of money doing that kind of arbitrage, right? Where they're doing that, and you could see that an AI could not only sell but buy and and set up and sell at the same time, right? Or,
and this
and that
is
comes
more
back to service as software, right? As you build the software to create these services, right? It becomes very powerful.
It becomes very powerful. And again, real world is messy, and what you do on Amazon is not going to work on Shopify, right? And so on and so forth, right?
Like to me, there's also a process element. Sales, when I tried to roll out social selling into VMware a couple of years ago, maybe 7 years ago, and we made complex slide decks that we went to our sales kickoff meetings and had a booth and got people, but there's a cultural thing around salespeople, right? There is a learning, there is a training that actually happens, right? And sometimes it's an augmentation strategy where you come in and say, look, this will just help you, right? versus a replacement strategy, an independent strategy. Well, how are you guys thinking about
Yeah.
that when you're talking to PipeIQ?
Yeah, I think AI systems in general, at least what I've seen from an application layer standpoint, even PipeIQ, right? Like we try to embed ourselves as much as possible within the workflow of the, of the sales rep, for example, right? That potentially has the highest ROI in the sense that the user doesn't have to change much of his workflow or what he does or how he does it, but yet derives a lot of the benefits that you get from AI. So that's point number one. Point number two, when you think about it from an autonomous orchestration standpoint, maybe there again you can take some things off of the plate of the sales rep now, and that may be just done in the background without you having to worry about it, right? So like if you can get meetings for sales reps, you don't need to worry about the meeting or how the system gets a meeting as far as it's doing within, with the appropriate guardrails until the meeting shows up in your calendar, for example, right? Like that's when you, okay, all right, I have a meeting here, PipeIQ has a meeting.
Yeah, right.
And here's some
okay,
call
okay.
notes they've already
Right.
given me, and they've given
Right.
me a call script too, or like
Right.
I mean,
Now you just
that's
engage with a potential
yes,
customer because
yes.
he spent 20 minutes on a page learning about your product, right?
That's
And so,
right.
yeah.
That's right.
Right.
And that's, that conversation, right, is
Right.
something that the AI is not able to do a great job at yet, right? I
Right.
mean, we're going to have agents for that as well soon, looks like. But
Mhm.
again, right, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think between now and then that has to be worked through. But
So I'm assuming that PipeIQ works with enterprises and
yes,
commercial size customers. You're not looking for the small shop doing
yeah.
optimized sales on Amazon, right?
No,
But
yeah.
you're looking at enterprise sales organizations,
Enterprise,
right?
mid-size enterprises,
Right.
right? I think the team has the competency and has the background, has dealt with these kind of customers before. So we know what a rollout looks like, right? For a mid-size or an enterprise customer. Absolutely. And, we'll eventually probably have even a PLG sort of strategy where, it's a land and expand and you come and start, right? Hey, maybe there's one person from.
Do you guys get into like PipeIQ? Like you're smart at pipeline management, right? And there is AI obviously that's
Right.
there, but do you engage with customers to do like an analysis, right, of
Yes.
what they've got and where the low hanging fruit is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we do assessments. We are happy to do assessments. Anybody, listening to the podcast, yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you, happy to do an assessment, look at what's working, what's not, conversion rates, what's the conversion rate, waterfall, right? Where's leakage potentially, right? Even top of funnel, right? I mean, some smaller folks don't have a pipeline at all, or there's nothing much set up, or maybe you just raised money and things like that. So depends, right? Like different companies are in different stages of the journey, right? Some more mature, some less mature, but
well, I got to imagine all sales orgs are looking to optimize and get more out of their sales team or reduce spend, right?
Right.
It's a tight market, tight economy.
Right.
So anywhere you can reduce spend and get more out of less is kind of what we're doing every year. You come into a 2025 budget planning session, and we're trying to figure out what we could do to get. And there was this game I played, right? I went to a leadership conference, right? And the leadership conference divided us up into like, teams of 6, right? There were like 100 people in this leadership offsite we did up in San Francisco. And then they gave us dollar amounts, right, for the budget next year for the whole company, right? And you had to figure out what kind of recruiting you want for your human resource function, how much finance you want to do, how much debt service you want to pay down, but also then special projects, right? Like where do you want to invest to optimize your sales team, right? Where do you want to invest in engineering to get better function so that it's easier to sell? And then it was all about making those bets, and then we'd run it through a simulator to see like how well you did, right? Like, did you increase sales, right? That's all of what it is. Did you increase profit margin, right? Did you have, you could do cost constraining projects, right? And put some money, but you had a finite number of chips, right? That you had to place your bets on the different functions in your organization. And I would say that's kind of going into 2025 planning, where if you do want to have a project that is, let's get more out of our sales team, using AI to do that. Do an analysis of, what your workflow is already, where are there places to optimize, and does AI actually play a part in that? Right?
That's right. Absolutely. I mean, I think on the revenue side, it's all about revenue lift, right? And of course, right, reducing cost. So on the customer support side, it's more around our customer success, customer support. Yeah, I think it's more around how do we reduce costs. So Yeah, I mean, I think ROI conversations is front and central, and I think amongst the multiple sectors, where AI is being deployed, talking about, a trough of disillusionment and hype cycles and so on. I think by far sales probably even more so than marketing. I mean, go to market in general. I think overall as a pie is probably a pretty attractive place in terms of the fact that it can demonstrate ROI in a very clear,
very
cogent
clear.
fashion.
Yeah,
very clear
sales
fashion.
sales is very very straightforward on
Yeah.
demonstrating ROI. Right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
it's
right.
just right there. Right? Like,
you
you either did
either
it or didn't.
yes,
Right.
Yeah. So.
Are there industry sales conferences that are out there that people go to learn, how to optimize your sales team? Is that kind of stuff exist?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Dreamforce, of course, is one of the bigger
of course,
ones, right? I mean, there was
but that's not really industry. That's just Salesforce, right?
Yeah.
But I guess that's probably.
I mean,
I've been to those.
Yeah.
I've been to Dreamforce and engaged there, and
yeah. I mean, there was a conference in Austin, I think, just last week or something. Yeah, GTM. Right. Yeah. There's a bunch of events, but yeah, I don't know. The top of mind, high quality. I'm not sure. I think Dreamforce comes to mind really, in terms of bringing a bunch of practitioners.
Where practitioners, sales practitioners, right? That are, and it's not necessarily sales people. Yeah. It's the company owners. It's the management that goes to Dreamforce in order to figure out how to penetrate sales, right?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Increase sales.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and yeah, I mean, Salesforce can be a pretty big line item in your budget for many companies. So, and I mean, even that disrupt, I mean, I think we should probably in the next podcast, I think, we could discuss stuff around.
Well, this gets back to my artificial intelligence is always investigating, right?
Yes.
And that's what I'd say. Like at some point, this industry is going to have to mature to be able to say, what am I going to get? Right? I've got workflow issues. I got people issues.
Right.
Now you're asking me to invest in this technology, right? Which again is always investigating. It should be investing. Always investing. Yeah.
Right.
And then what's the ROI on this, right? Like, and how long does it take to implement this stuff? When am I going to get payback? Because I think and that's where, for me, the service as software should do a better job at this, because you really are domain specific, right? You're coming in going, okay, we're going to save you X amount of dollars or increase your productivity or, filter out bad leads or whatever you're using the AI and your agents for to accomplish this, to optimize that workflow.
Yes, absolutely. I think ROI is definitely front and central, and I think there's very clear markers that you can see, right, especially in a sales funnel, that you can sort of peg against, benchmark against, and see what kind of outcomes you get. So it's the right kind of conversation to have. Yes, it's an investment.
Well, so we've been going for now 50 minutes, almost 50 minutes. Wow. Time flies.
Time flies.
Fun. Yeah, it does. I like to finish up and talk a little bit about what excites you.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about maybe what are you scared of. But like, anything this week that got you excited?
I think after the space takeoff and landing thing, it's a hard one. It's a hard one to beat. But I'm overall, I mean, honestly, every day I'm seeing different things. And one thing we didn't talk about, the swarm of agents thing, is like last week I saw OpenAI released a new GitHub repo around the swarm of agents, just quote unquote educational purpose is what it says. But I'm sure over the next 3-4 months.
And is it code based on agents itself, or
are they offering?
I look at GitHub and I assume it's code, but
it is. It's some sort of a framework.
Right.
Again, I mean, I guess there's LangChain out there. Or LangGraph, right? And so I think this is an attempt from OpenAI. So I'm not dug into that too much, but that's an interesting. Again, it's a smaller sort of development, but I think I'm pretty bullish about just the fact that the macroeconomic environment, right, I think is moving up slowly, trending up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
so
true.
that is good news. I think
we get through the election season.
Yes,
we'll get back to business,
right? More stability and more clarity.
Well, I got to look at my week this week. The thing that I was blown away at was Boston Dynamics came out with their new robot, or at least I got exposed to it. They might have already come out with it, but there's now videos on YouTube of their new robot, and it's the big the Boston fully autonomous droid kind of robot was very big and clunky, but it had a big big engine pack on the back of it,
Mm.
and it was hydraulic oil servo based technology. That was the old Boston robot, and you saw it dancing and doing
Right.
flips off of the boxes and
Right.
pretty impressive stuff.
Yes.
Their new one is all electric motor driven, right? So no more oil hydraulics, right? Now it's just electro servo motors, right? Very sleek, very clean, very packaged. Maybe a little bit thinner, smaller, but lithium battery pack driven,
Amazing.
all electric.
Right.
And let me tell you, if you've seen the dogs do their little fun tricks, their Android is even better, right? And they're going to put AI in that, right?
Yes.
And so one of these days we're going to have people mowing my grass and walking around my house and doing my laundry. And
exactly.
I just want somebody to mop the floor,
mop the floor, vacuum, and mop the floor, and maybe even put the dishes, the dishwasher.
Right. Just have company, right? Just have. I don't know if I want a dog for company, but I wouldn't mind having like a virtual me or virtual somebody there that are there. And I think their prices are still pretty high because they get into defense contracting, and I'm sure they're industrial automation and that kind of stuff. But it is really nice, right?
That's pretty.
So that excites me. There's AI, but there's AI in self-driving cars, AI everywhere, and AI in a drone. Drone security is a big market for that now, right? Like they use a lot of the dogs for security, but now you got an Android that can walk around. That's good. That's going to be fun. Right?
Yeah,
so,
that's another, the whole robots thing. I think is pretty cool actually.
And then I'm thinking of a whole sales team, and they're just all droids. And they got PIpeIQ, and they're using it to close deals. Right?
Well, I don't know. Even we don't need hardware robots; just software robots is good enough.
That doesn't seem as much fun, right? Like I think we have to have a sweatshop.
Whip physical
the robots and make them work harder. Tell them they're not going to get their robot bonus without closing more deals. Right. Yeah. So that excites me.
That's cool.
My biggest fear. I'll start with my fear first, which is like, how are we all going to end up having jobs, right? Because if you really look at the service industry, which is whatever you say, 5 trillion, 10 trillion, I don't know what number you said.
Right.
But that's where we make our living, right? Like, we are in marketing, right? Or I'm in marketing, and then I work with sales, and we do sales enablement. And like, if we start automating this, like, are we going to all have to have a basic income, right?
UBI, universal basic income. Right? Like,
I'm worried about it. Maybe this is going to go slow enough that I'm going to retire in 10 years anyway. So maybe I don't really have to worry about.
Don't have to worry about it. Yeah, maybe our kids have to.
Right.
Yeah, I think even philosophers, if you think about it for a second, from a philosophical standpoint, there have been philosophers who have asked in the 80s, actually, what are human beings going to do, right? When, everything is going to be done by machines or robots or computers, right? Right. So I think this thought is not new, right? What are human beings going to do? And I think, honestly, from my standpoint, I think the way I think about this is really, one framework could be Maslow's hierarchy, right? And so self-actualization, actually, right? Reflection, meaning, right? I think human beings potentially could kind of spend more and more time on that. And there's of course an angle around, UBI or, yes.
I guess I shouldn't really worry too much about it as long as I'm off the back of the floor.
Yes.
I'll find something else to do.
Yes.
Right? Like I'm sure I can find something else
to do.
They can mow my grass, pick my tomatoes out of the garden, and
my God.
do all that
well,
stuff.
that you can do. Maybe that'll be artisanal. You pick the tomatoes of the not of the grass, of the plants.
And that's the other thing. They won't go to sleep, right? So like then they'll always be up. They'll always be doing something, right? I guess you have to recharge them, but that's about it. So does anything pop into your mind this week?
No, challenges challenging. I think at PIpeIQ we're continuing to build, right, and talk to customers. That's the most important part, right? So talking to customers, learning from them, and just understanding different markets and different dynamics, because the data structures. Again, the theme of data is ever present, really, right? So some sectors, verticals have data characteristics that are different from other verticals, and that's definitely sort of been on my mind. But that's not specifically what's keeping me up at night, fortunately. So
Good.
That's a good thing.
Good.
Running a startup as it is a roller coaster ride, anyways. So
So this is podcast number 3,
Yes.
right? And we're coming up at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
So first comment is thanks for everybody making it to
Yes,
the end.
thank
I
you.
appreciate listening. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're learning a couple things.
Right.
Where can people subscribe to this podcast? If you see it on LinkedIn, I don't think you can subscribe to LinkedIn, right? So
you can follow me.
where
You
are
can
putting it?
follow PipeIQ on LinkedIn. You can follow me, Rajesh Kadam, on LinkedIn. Those are 2 things you can do, and you'll probably get notified about upcoming episodes. Number 1. 2, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Right, we are both
Nice.
on those, and then
Right.
I think we are on
Those are-
YouTube as well.
Yeah, so okay, those are the big ones, which
Yes.
is Spotify and iTunes, right? And just look for PipeIQ Weekly AI Podcast. Search for that title, you'll see us and give us a follow, right?
Yes.
Because and if you want to give us a like, that's even better, right? And subscribe and a notification. Hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube.
Right.
But we are streaming on all 3 of those, and we do this weekly,
Yes.
right? Where we'll cover the latest AI news, right? So that you can learn about what's actually happening over the week. There is so much happening, so much investment, so many announcements.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about, because
AI.
the service wedge is getting bigger, right? Everybody's figuring out where to invest. And it's not just customers, it's providers, right?
Yes.
And it's VCs, it's everybody trying to get ahead of this.
There's
right?
a little bit of a
'Cause it's
gold
gonna
rush,
change,
if you will.
It's going to change it. It reminds me of the internet, right? Like when the internet showed up, all of a sudden you could do online orders. Before that, there was no online orders. You had yellow pages, right? And I look at this now, and everybody's going, "Oh, this is going to reinvent how we do business, right? And how we engage with customers, right? And whether it's Notebook LM, which is like fake podcasters that are engaging with this, right? Or it's PipeIQ that's helping you engage with your customers and provide value to them. To everything. So
no, this is great. I really enjoy these conversations, honestly.
So every week we're going to do them,
Yes.
and give us a link or a follow, and then I think those are the 2 things. LinkedIn, I think Twitter.
Twitter we're not streaming yet, but we will. And my handle, I mean, I'm not super active on Twitter, but my handle on LinkedIn is on Twitter is the number 66 and my last name KADAM. So 6.
And then we're going to get the PipeIQ Twitter account.
Yes, we'll set that up as well if you don't have
because
one.
What I like about Twitter, believe it or not, is just the conversational aspect. If you tweet at us, we'll tweet back at you, right? Like, and so if you have a question that we're live. We do these sessions live, but if you miss it, you can tweet at us, and we'll be there.
Absolutely.
Way to have a conversation.
Yes. Always looking for conversations. I think with our.
You can also put comments on LinkedIn, right? But it's a little less conversational, right? Where Twitter actually, you can have quite a bit of conversation really quickly with a lot of people, right? Because you get a lot of followers, then away you go. So look for PipeIQ there, and and then we'll be back again next week. Next week, I think we're going to talk about the cost for customers for solutions, right? Like it shouldn't always be AI. Always investigating. It should be. It should be ROI, right? And we'll have an ROI conversation. So when you're looking at your business and your workflow for sales, you can look at milestones. How long will it take? How much should it cost you? And what do you get out of that? Right? Like what's the ROI?
ROI. Right? It's fair. I mean, that's exactly how you should be thinking about these things.
We'll drill into some of that so that instead of it always investigating, we can say, always making money,
or helping you make money.
Right. And optimizing, which is, I think there have been really good use cases for AI where they do get domain specific.
Right.
You can show where they're actually providing value, right? And some of the legal stuff for me is, when you go to ChatGPT and you ask for a legal document, it just does it. Right. Like if I were a lawyer right now, I'd be like, I better go figure out how to get that universal basic income, because right now I don't call my lawyer. I just go to ChatGPT and go, this county, this thing, where do I get my license? I need a business license, or I need this or that. And boy, it just spits out that serial answer, right?
It's amazing.
So I think as we get into services, then understanding the ROI, and especially for pipeline acceleration, what are the costs?
Yes.
What is the workflow? What do you got to do training wise for that? So that's next week on episode 4. We'll cover the news. We'll talk some industry, and then we'll get into the cost of the industry. Like, because it is interesting to see how much money ChatGPT is
yeah.
OpenAI
I mean,
is
we
getting,
can look at some high level
like
stuff around hyperscalers and what kind of costs. That'll be a fun conversation.
Get you exposed to the basics of
right.
Cost analysis for always investigating.
Right.
Sorry,
It'll help us understand why NVIDIA's stock price is where it is. So.
All right. Well, we've been at 60 minutes. Thanks a lot for enjoying it. We'll be back next week. And until then, everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.